Joining us now, Jonathan Schanzer. He is a Middle East scholar at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, which is a nonpartisan policy institute focusing on foreign policy. He joins us now. Welcome.
Thank you.
I want to talk about a number of things, but first let's talk with about John Kerry and the UN Secretary General in Cairo with the hopes of getting mediation, talks of a ceasefire back on track. Will diplomatic efforts help at this point?
Well, look, I think it's important to note that diplomatic efforts have to be ongoing. It's the only way that you're eventually going to get a ceasefire done, and that's, of course, in everyone's interest. I think the Israelis want calm. I think the people of Gaza want calm. Certainly the international community is pushing for that. And so it's important that this happens. At the same time, I think it's also important to note that Secretary of State John Kerry has lost a lot of credibility. His failed peacemaking efforts that culminated in that failure 2 months ago, I think in many ways brought this kind of conflict to the fore. And we're hearing right now that he's really not playing a terribly central role in everything that's ongoing. Nevertheless, it's important that he's there. It's important that all the actors know that the United States is pushing for this.
Is part of that also, Jonathan, the fact that John Kerry made some unguarded comments about the Israeli offensive yesterday while on television, not realizing that he was being recorded at the time, and in it he seemed to be very negative in terms of Israel's actions here. Now, do you think many may perceive his comments as being critical of the Israeli operation?
Well, look, that hot mic comment basically indicated that he was uncomfortable with the number of casualties. Let me just say this, that the United States knew, just as everyone else knows, that when you go into a close quarter urban combat type of war, there are going to be high casualties. This is not to say that we welcome them. Of course, looking at the casualty counts, it is horrific. But nevertheless, this was something that was known to the United States. And so to hear a comment like that from the Secretary of State, I'm sure was not terribly welcomed by the Israelis. But I don't think that it necessarily stops him from making progress over there. Look, again, I think it's important to note that the United States has really lost a lot of its influence over there in that region. And we're just seeing the fruits of that right now, unfortunately.
Well, let's also talk about Israel's actions in all of this. Certainly the country has said all along that it was Hamas that started this by firing rockets into Israel. Israel's only defending itself. The question now is, once this goal of terminating or eliminating the tunnels does happen, because there are these tunnels, multiple tunnels working their way into Israel, do you think that Israel wants to reoccupy Gaza once this particular operation is over?
No. I mean, I think that would be, the worst of all the options that I have heard in the Israeli media. I think what they'd like to see is a demilitarized Hamas. More than anything, a weakened and hobbled Hamas that can't build these tunnels that snake into Israeli territory that can help facilitate commando attacks, a Hamas that doesn't have the rocket-making capabilities, and certainly a Hamas that doesn't have the ability to smuggle in these long-range rockets that can reach Haifa or Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. I think a second choice for the Israelis might be that perhaps they would like Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority based in the West Bank, to be able to take over the Gaza Strip. I think this would be exceedingly difficult. To try to have a leadership transplant in the Gaza Strip, I think, could be potentially rejected because it would be something that the Israelis facilitated. I think the third choice, the worst choice out of all of them, would be for Israel to get back into the Gaza Strip and try to, tend to the day-to-day issues inside Gaza. Of course, the Israelis would not be welcomed. I would suspect that you'd see a lot of terrorism and violence, and this, of course, is something that most Israelis would rather not have. They just don't want the responsibility, don't want to be saddled with something like this.
All right, Jonathan Schanzer, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.